Experiencing a break-in is a uniquely disturbing experience, especially if you're in the house. Not only does it rob you of your valuables, but also of your sense of safety at home. Maybe you'll never feel safe again. You're about to experience these horrors now. So get comfortable, subscribe, and let the darkness take control. This happened in the year of 1989, when I was 9 years old. I lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Forest, Virginia. It was like a Mayberry-like neighborhood. Most everyone knew each other, no crime, lots of families. Not everyone locked their doors at night. There were lots of kids my age in the neighborhood, but the two on my street were my closest friends, Mitchell and Chase. The three of us were sort of a clique. Whenever a new kid moved into the neighborhood, we'd like to go see him together to see what he was like and decide if he was cool or not. That year, a new family moved into a house near the end of the street. They had just one child, a boy named Parker. We invited him out a few times to play and he seemed cool, so before long he was almost one of the gang. Parker's mum was attractive, blonde, slim, always smiling. However, his dad was not a friendly man. He seemed annoyed by us kids, rarely spoke to us, and mostly just acknowledged us with eye rolls and grunts. He also didn't come outside much. He worked nights, so we didn't see him often during the week. And on weekends, he was mostly banging around in his garage. One Saturday afternoon in the fall, Mitch and Chase were both away for some reason, so I went over to Parker's house alone to see if he wanted to play. He said his parents weren't home and invited me inside. That was a really strange experience for me. At 9, my parents never left me alone. They would call a babysitter over if they were going to be gone for even an hour. I asked Parker why he was home alone and made no secret that I was weirded out about it, but he seemed totally fine with it, like it happened all the time, so that put me at ease. We watched TV for a little bit, then abruptly Parker got off the couch and said, "Hey, you want to see something cool?" "Sure," I said. He led me down to the basement and pointed to a tool chest against the wall. "They're in here." Parker opened the bottom cupboard drawer of the tool chest, revealing a huge stack of Playboys. There had to have been at least 50 to 60 issues in there. I had no idea what I was looking at. I'd never seen a naked woman before. The closest I had come was seeing the scantily clad Tanya Roberts in the movie The Beastmasters. I remember watching that movie and being vaguely intrigued by the female form, but what I saw in the Playboys was sort of repulsive. It wasn't necessarily the images of the naked women that churned my stomach, but the dank and musty smell of the basement, the dim lights, the crinkled, stiff, flaky feel of the magazine pages, as if the moisture of the basement was slowly turning them to pulp. It just felt wrong and gross, and I wanted to leave. Still, I just couldn't stop looking. I'd flip through one magazine, toss it back, then flip through another one. Somehow I had this strange notion that I was finally getting something valuable for free. So I needed to cram as much of it into my brain as I could. Finally, Parker said, "We better get out of here. My mom will be home soon. You can tear some pictures out and take them home if you want." I ripped out one of the centerfolds and stuffed it into my pocket. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't want it for any self-gratification purpose. I just had an idea that I could use it to impress Michael and Chase later. When I got home, I stuffed the balled-up centerfold in the back corner of my closet under some toys. Despite not having a deep understanding of what it was, pornography, I was certain that if my mum found it, I'd be in big trouble. I went to sleep like normal that evening, but awoke abruptly in the middle of the night to a rough hand shaking my shoulder. I immediately knew something was wrong, because neither of my parents would have woken me up so firmly. Plus, There was a terrible smell, a rank combination of alcohol and motor oil. I opened my eyes, and with the aid of my bedside light, recognized Parker's dad standing over me, in my house, in my room. I wanted to cry, to scream for my dad, but the man glared down at me with so much hatred, so much fury. I was paralyzed. I was certain that if I did cry out, he would twist the head clean off my neck. "You stole from me." He said this in a low voice, low enough not to wake my parents in the other room, but in the quiet of my room the words rang clear as a bell. He called me the F word. That's what really struck me. No adult had ever used the F word on me. Combined with his tone, expression, and body language, that word just cut me to the bone. "I want it back," he said. Numbly, my heart hammering, I quietly and obediently went to my closet and dug out the balled-up centerfold from beneath a pile of Ninja Turtles. I held it out to him, and he snatched it. At this point, he went on a low, whispery rant at me, including a lecture about thievery and personal property. I don't remember all of it, but it went along the lines of, "I'll tell your parents, I'll call the cops, you'll go to juvie." But he said two phrases I distinctly remember. One was, "Don't ever come in my house again. Don't even step foot in my yard again." And the other was something that was so strange, said with so much sincerity, that it burnt into my memory, and still haunts me to this day. "Don't ever look at this crap again." He clenched his fists around the balled-up centerfold. "It will turn you into something you don't want to be." Then he turned and walked silently out of my room. I was so creeped out about how silent he slipped away. Our floors were carpeted, but he literally made no sound as he disappeared down the hall into the darkness, like some malicious Santa Claus. It was like he had lots of previous practice at sneaking around, which I found even more disturbing. When I thought back on the incident during the following years, it was that sneaking which haunted me most of all, even more than the lecture and the threats. How quietly and stealthily he moved, like the Grinch in the cartoon, but not with that big cartoony stride. Like I would never be safe from him no matter where I went in life. Like any time I went to sleep, he could just appear right there, without a sound, and I'd never hear him coming. The aftermath of this story is a whole story in itself. I won't get into all the details, but just summarize it. No sign of forced entry or evidence of him being there was ever found by me or anyone else. I never told anyone, until I got really close to a few good friends my freshman year of high school. My parents never found out about the incident. I was convinced that I would be in so much trouble if they ever found out, that I just figured it was better to live in fear than face the consequences. Obviously, Parker's dad never mentioned it to either of them, but of course he wouldn't, that trespassing creep. I'm 35 years old now, and have a good relationship with them, but I still can't bring myself to tell them what happened that night. I was emotionally damaged for a while. I had fear and anxiety, and shyness issues. My grades slipped badly that year. I had a hard time sleeping at night after that, and was tired all the time because I had chronic nightmares. My parents got me some prescription sleeping aids, and I couldn't sleep in the dark again until I was at least 15 or 16. I always had to have a lamp on my bedside. I couldn't go near Parker's end of the street from then on, much less in his yard or house. If my parents drove me by the house, I would simply point my head towards the opposite side of the street and pretend to be looking out the window. My family moved 2 years later in 1991, and I never saw Parker again after that. I asked my dad sometime later if he always locked the doors at night. He says, yes, most of the time, but sometimes I forget. I asked him if he made sure all the windows were locked at night, and he said that no, sometimes our mum opened them, and he forgot to lock them back when she closed them. So that answers the question as to how he got in the house. I still get queasy when I see porn. On one hand, like any red-blooded male, images of the internet of attractive women wearing no clothes catch my eye. But when I really start to stare and get into the moment, the fear of that night starts creeping back in. The unanswered questions. How did he even find out I had the page? Had he gotten home, seen his magazines weren't in proper order, and grilled Parker about it? Why the hell would this guy make such a fuss and go to some extreme measures just to retrieve one torn-out page of an old Playboy? Makes no sense. What did he mean by, "It will turn you into something you wouldn't want to be"? A trespasser? An asshole who terrorizes kids? A porn addict? Was what he did to me that night, in some weird-ass way, his twisted attempt to try and do something altruistic to me? To warn me off from becoming like him? How does a guy have so much balls? Seriously. My parents were asleep, one room away. My dad was a big dude, bigger than him, and my dad would have thrown that man right through a wall if he had caught him in my room in the middle of the night. Regardless, malicious Santa Claus, overprotective porn collector, terrorizer of children, and source of my nightmares, and scar on my childhood. Let's not meet again. I live in a not-so-large, not-so-friendly block of flats. Well, it's really more of a converted old Victorian house, which is now modified into 5 small flats per block, with there being 4 blocks and me living in the second one. Just for some context, the main door is really crappy and still hasn't been replaced even though the entire building has been refurbished. This is the case despite the landlord promising it would be done by New Year. Anyway, this door doesn't lock when you close it. It has to be locked manually either by the key from the outside or by the twisty lock on the inside. Unfortunately, the people who live around me can be, well, let's say rude, and that's putting it kindly. They're always blasting music until late, setting off the fire alarm which is linked in every flat, and it's super loud and annoying. I'm smoking inside most of the time. However, the most annoying thing, always, and I mean always, is leaving the main door unlocked. This was nothing more than annoying up until very recently, when something truly horrific happened as a result. It was a Thursday night, and as usual I was getting ready for bed at around 11 PM. And as per usual, despite it being a weekday, one of the surrounding flats in a different block to mine was throwing a party. This was annoying and unfair. Come on guys, for real, who throws a party on a Thursday? I mean, just wait for Friday. Not only that though, it's supposed to be lockdown, so while other people can't even see their families, me included, you get to keep everyone up. The music was noticeable but not super loud from the comfort of my bedroom, thankfully. So I do what I always do when I go to bed. I put on some scary stories to help me chill out and sleep. So I finally managed to drift off at around midnight, and I awoke for the first time at around 2 because of the music. So I growl and begrudgingly get up to go to the bathroom, as I thought I may as well as I'm already up. So annoyed and frustrated, I get back into bed and continue to enjoy my stories until I'm asleep once more. I'm suddenly awoken by loud stomps coming up the stairs. I live at the very top of the building, so the final staircase only leads to my door. Now I'm more exhausted than angry, so I just lie there awake until I hear something that jolts my half-asleep brain fully awake. My door is being pushed. Someone is actually trying to push open my door and enter my flat, without my permission. Not hard or forcefully, mind you, not like they were trying to break it down, but they definitely tried to gain entry. Now this may be just because my mind was still foggy, or that I was still so tired that I didn't care, but I stupidly assumed it was some drunken partygoer who had mistakenly gone to the wrong block. Maybe the party was at a different top-floor flat, so I ignored them, even when it happened again and I could hear scratching and mumbling on the other side of the door. Stupid, I know, but I really wanted to sleep. So the next morning I woke up as usual and got ready for work. As I opened my door to leave, what do I see? 2 men sleeping on the floor blocking my way, one bleeding from his head. And I'm not judgmental, or at least try not to be, but these men were clearly homeless. I mean, the smell of one alone told me that it was like having a ball of dirt slapped in your face. Not ideal for an early morning start. When I eventually got one of them to get up, the other failed to do so. He was clearly on drugs and was completely out of it. Thankfully for me, the man was okay. I mean, I could have just been rushed, but they explained that they had been attacked and chased and took shelter here. I offered to call an ambulance, which the men eventually accepted, through a one-sided conversation of murmurs and groans. So I stepped out to get a better look at the man on the ground, and as I did, the other stepped inside my flat. I stared at him with our eyes locked, and he came right back out without incident as I locked my door. The ambulance eventually arrived. I had to dial 999 as there was no one manning the non-emergency number, probably because of the current pandemic, and I went to work. Informed the landlord, and he would warn the other people living there apparently that they must keep the door locked. But of course every morning I get to work and the door is wide open without consequence. But the real kicker is that because the guy was bleeding and homeless, I didn't want to clean it up myself, so I had to get a professional cleaner to do it. And when I asked for my landlord to chip in, he ignored me for a few days, and when he eventually got back to me, he said, "It's only on the walks." Brilliant. So I ended up paying the whole thing myself because I just didn't feel comfortable with it being around me. Now, I do not believe those men had intentions to hurt me, but what if I hadn't have locked my door? What if they had have gotten in? When people are desperate and opportunities present themselves, you really don't know what people will do. 2 of them, 1 of me, alone, asleep, vulnerable. Pretty scary when you think about it. I was driving home when I realized a truck had been behind me for miles. Just to be precautious, I made an abrupt, last-second U-turn. He did too. It was there that I realized he was following me. While on the phone with 911, I made sharp turns and ran red lights to try and lose him. He wouldn't stop, literally almost hitting my car a couple of times as he sped up trying to catch me. The 911 operator instructed me to go to a local grocery store and wait for police. I parked right in front of the store entrance where the surveillance cameras were and waited. He decided to park his car at a distance and waited for me to leave my vehicle. All of a sudden, I heard a knock at the window. I freaked out, and it turned out to be the grocery store manager letting me know 911 had notified him of the situation. He asked if I wanted to go inside the store, and he would protect me until the cops arrived. I honestly feared for the worst and said no. I was shaking, but I thought this maniac might have a gun, and he could shoot me and everyone in there. The cops arrived and luckily cornered him in the back of the parking lot. I was shaking as they came to my car. My hands gripped the wheel very tightly, and they arrested him soon after for a 3rd DUI, and police filed a report. I didn't know who he was. Apparently, he only lived a couple of miles away from me. The real thrill to this story, though. 2 months later, I receive a letter to notify me that I may be subpoenaed. I called the DMV who issued the letter, and they notify me that not only is he free again, but that my information, including my address, were on the police report that was provided to him and his attorney. Thanks, LAPD. I now live in fear that any day He is going to come and hurt me in his revenge or to carry on his stalking, and I have no idea what to do. Ever since I was younger, I've heard people call my name, whether it be somewhere rural or in my home. It's constantly happened, and it's starting to freak me out. Let me give you a bit of context. I am a 17-year-old female. I live in Florida and have always been aware of my Native American culture, even though I'm not of that heritage myself. This all started when I was very young. The first instance of this happening was when I was living with my grandmother. Her and I were very close. I was wide awake in bed, unable to sleep with her to my right. There's no doubt in my mind that she was deeply asleep, only a few inches from me. Every television in the house was off, and the only other person in the house was my grandfather asleep in his room. Then very clearly and loudly I heard my grandmother call me from the kitchen. Almost how you'd call someone for dinner. I know it's common to hear your name being called mistakenly, but I did more research on this as a teen, and apparently when you hear your name being called this loud, you're supposed to reject it. Not knowing this, I just huddled closer to my grandmother and kept my eyes locked on the open door. The second instance was around 13 or 14 when my father took me on a trip to Las Vegas. We visited some part of the Grand Canyon, and while my family were waiting in line for a skywalk bridge, we paid for a tour. I wandered around the edge a good distance away from my family, and decided to yell my name into the canyon to hear my echo. When it came back to me, it sounded distorted, almost like my grandmother had yelled my name back. It might have not been my grandmother, but it was very similar. Nonetheless, just the fact that it was distorted was enough to scare me a little. I don't put much weight into this experience, as it could have just been my own voice coming back weirdly. The next event happened when I was 13. It was the most terrifying one I've ever had. This is the closest I've ever been to whatever this thing is, and proves my point that it's mimicking people. I was on a vacation with my family in Key West and had rented a home. I invited my best friend, called Ash, to stay with us. On the third day, we decided to skip out on a boating trip and mooch off the house owner's Netflix all day. At about the 5th episode of whatever we were watching, we decided on a snack refill and bathroom break. We paused the television and make our way to the kitchen. I believe that Ash had followed me into the kitchen and leaned on the island while I prepared some chips with my back turned to her. I held a full-on conversation with whatever the thing was and even looked back at her on the phone. I fully had no doubt in my mind I was talking and looking at Ash on her phone. She even held it in this specific way that Ash does. I turned my back for a split second to pick up the bowls and suggested we head back to the couch, when I see Ash, or the real Ash anyway, walk out the bathroom, which was a solid 30 feet away. My body immediately went cold, and the first thing I asked her was how she got to the bathroom in and out without me hearing. She gave me the strangest look and told me she's been in there the whole time since we got up. This is where I start freaking out and insist that I had just been talking to her and even physically saw her. She joked about doppelgangers and how she was going to die. I quickly suggested we get out of the house and walk around the neighborhood. She then informed me she had gotten her period while she was in the bathroom, at the same time I was talking to whatever it was. We walked around until my mum called me that she was back in the house. We're still best friends to this day and have been for 11 years. And I've asked her about it, and she said she didn't even hear me speaking with anyone at all. Now at this point you might think I'm crazy, but for this next one I have witnesses. I was on a vacation near the Great Smoky Mountains, just a little west in Surreyville, Tennessee. We had our previous reservations cancelled, so we took this little rundown cabin owned by a local woman. Now we got there late at night, and During the moment we all stepped out the car, the first thing we heard was a man's voice, "Hey neighbors," coming from one of the cabins to our left, that was higher up on the mountain than we were. We couldn't see the cabin really, just a road that led further up, and we all assumed he could see us, but we not him. Probably some guy on his balcony, we thought. My friendly stepdad yelled, "Hey," and waved up towards the direction the sound came from. It wouldn't have been weird if this didn't happen every time we stepped out the cabin or car. My family completely wrote it off as some type of hospitality we were not used to in Miami. Retelling it, my brother and my friends agreed it was weird. I did hear constant footsteps around the cabin at night and some outside my window. But I didn't give it much thought since wildlife is a thing in the woods. Just something I thought I should mention. The thing that really propelled me into researching what the hell was happening to me was when I was having a photo shoot in the woods behind the cabin, and both my brother, sister, and I heard something calling my name deeper in the woods. Since I was with my younger siblings, I went into a full big sister protection mode and almost threw them back down the little slope we had to climb to get to the woods. We were all crapping ourselves from how clear it was and how we all pinpointed it was coming from the deeper woods and nowhere near the cabin. This was during the day, and we were all so thrown by this that we stayed in for the rest of the trip. We all agreed it was a woman's voice, and the first thing I asked my mum when we went outside was, "Did you call me?" She had been lounging in her room with my stepdad all day, trusting that I could take care of the younger ones just outside the cabin. She saw how freaked out the kids were, and we didn't really go outside at night for the rest of our trip. I think I reacted to this quite badly, because I had kids to take care of and I can tell that they were terrified out there. The voice sounded like someone was looking for me or calling me back somewhere. With no knowledge of what this could have been, I finally decided to look into things when I turned 17. I had no previous knowledge of Wendigos or skinwalkers or anything cryptic, only ghost investigation shows. I'm desperate for answers, because at this point I'm constantly thinking about it and driving myself into rabbit holes of information, myths, and legends. It was 1 a.m., and Guy Halverson sat in his dark living room. He hadn't moved for over an hour. The accident earlier that evening kept playing over and over in his mind. The light turned red, but he was in a hurry and accelerated. An orange blur came from his right, and in a split second, there was a violent jolt, and the cyclist rolled across his hood and fell out of sight on the pavement. Horns blared angrily, and he panicked, stepping on the gas and screeching away from the chaos into the darkness. Shaken and keeping an eye on his rearview mirror until he got home. Why did you run, you idiot? He'd never committed a crime before and punished himself by imagining years in jail, his career gone, his family gone, his future gone. Why not just go to the police now? You can afford a lawyer. Then, someone tapped on the front door, and his world suddenly crumbled away beneath him. They found me. There was nothing he could do but answer for his crimes. Running would only make it worse. His body trembling, he got up, reached for the door, and opened it. A police officer stood under the porch light. "Mr. Halverson?" asked the grim officer. He let out a defeated sigh. "Yes. I'm terribly sorry, sir, but I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your son's bike was struck by a hit-and-run driver this evening. He died at the scene. I'm very sorry for your loss." I was pulling a guard shift near a hospital one night in northern Iraq. There hadn't been any action for the whole previous week, so the staff were all racked out. I was walking the halls and everything was supposed to be off or on standby. I walked past one room that they use for locals who are for victims of trauma. The lights were on, so I toggled the switch down to turn them off. I started walking down the hall again, and I saw the lights come back out of the corner of my eye. This is when I went into alert mode. I cleared the corner and looked into the room. There was nothing. I put the switch back in the down position again and went to call it up on the intercom. The radio was on the fritz, so I began walking back to the main desk to report it in person. The lights had turned on again. At this point I'm a little on edge. I can't radio in for help, and there is nobody on the side of the compound that would hear me yell. And the light switch position keeps changing when the lights go back on. Keep in mind that I am on a forward operating base in a combat zone. I don't know what I was expecting when I went to clear the corner and look into the room again. But I saw nothing but an empty room, a gurney, a heart monitor, and a crash cart. I couldn't tell you this day why I said what I did, but I was worried that if I didn't, the lights would keep switching back on. I said, "If you're scared of the dark, I'll leave the lights on for you." I finished my shift and left the lights on. I left a little note on the desk that one of the surgeons had asked me to always leave the lights on, just in case they had an emergency to come in. For the remainder of my shifts, that light had always remained on. I grew up in a really old house. It was nearing 100 years old right before I moved out, and it used to be a post office or something way back in the day. The house is creepy and big. There are 3 stories, but I was never really scared living up there or anything, although I did like to scare my friends with all kinds of made-up stories, and they always believed me too. The only weird thing that ever happened was when my parents left over a December holiday, and I had the house to myself all week. Me and my friend were bored, just sitting outside on the back porch drinking some beers. All of the doors were locked except for the one closest to us. It's just a metal frame door, fitted with glass that you can see outside of, but from the outside you only see your own reflection, like a one-way mirror. Well, while we're just chilling and talking, someone bangs on the door so hard, I was surprised that the glass didn't shatter. My first thought was that my parents came home early and caught both me and my friend drinking underage. We go into the house and there's nobody, and we looked everywhere. About 2 days go by and nothing happened. Now my room was covered in posters like most teens. I wake up in the morning, and every single one of my posters are taken off the walls and cupboards and are lying neatly folded on my chair. There's no one in the house but me, so either I did it while sleepwalking or it was someone else. To this day I have no idea what happened, and nothing weird ever occurred after that. This was late November of 2012, and I was doing an install in a winery in Northern California. It was a long day because we were working out of town, so we worked late to get it finished in one day. I started driving home around midnight and had about a 3-hour drive back home to Oakland. It's about 1:30 a.m. and I'm outside of Stockton, and I see this girl standing on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. She's wearing a white dress that ends at about 3 inches above her knees, and she's barefoot, with long black hair flowing down her shoulders, and is standing statuesquely. I look at her as I drove by, but she didn't move, didn't acknowledge my loud truck as it passed or anything. I was pretty freaked out, because you always hear stories like this, and then she appears in your vehicle, but that wasn't the case. She just stood there in the night. The thing that was most weird to me was that it was a cold night, about low 40s, and was drizzling a bit, and she was wearing a short dress with no shoes standing on the asphalt. If this is just some girl who does this for fun to freak people out, I feel like she would have been extremely cold and shivering, but this girl didn't move. After I got home, I was still thinking about it and searched Ghost Girl outside of Stockton, CA, and found a bunch of articles and stories about the East 8 Mile Road Ghost Girl, and most of the descriptions fit what I saw to a T. I never went back to the area because I moved to another state shortly after, but I want to travel back there to see if I can find her again one day. This happened about 15 years ago back in Mexico. Me and my dad, along with some friends, were out in the woods gathering firewood. An old dirt road used mainly by cattle and ranchers. No other traffic that far out. 10 minutes later, this nice new truck with tinted windows coming from the opposite direction stops about 25 feet in front of my dad's truck. We could hear somebody crying in the truck. Most likely a woman, but I'm unsure. But me being 10 didn't think much about it, and continued to grab fallen branches. The truck just stopped, but no one left the vehicle. My dad told us that was enough for the day, and it was getting dark. All the older guys in the group seemed to know something was up, and jumped in the truck in a hurry. I even got my finger smashed on the door because of it. But again, I didn't think much of it aside from my finger getting bloodied. I remember my dad driving fast. They talked and murmured, but it was grown-ups talk to me, and all I could think about was the finger and the pain. When I got back to the town, my dad pounded a few beers and they talked. Several years later, when I was in my early 20s, that memory came back, and I connected the dots to what we'd witnessed. I'd never felt so much fear in my life before. To this day, the scariest thing that ever happened to me is that. I don't have the guts to bring it up to my dad, but I'm pretty sure it was some sort of cartel-related deal. But for some reason they decided we didn't see anything. Also, this is because back in the day and in my area, you never really heard of crime like that. The only crime was cartel on cartel, super secretive crime. So I'm sure that whoever was inside probably had something to do with them. If it was cartel related at all, that is. There's a good chance it could have been something else entirely. But I can only imagine what my dad felt, having me and his friends with him there, and seeing something that we were not supposed to see. It could have gone terribly wrong for all of us. My husband has been a godsend ever since I got sick. My doctors were really stumped at first, but we figured it out. The doctor prescribed me a medicine to take every 6 hours. It's supposed to help with the pain. My husband is an excellent nurse. At first, I hated to have him do it. My illness was turning me into a person I didn't recognize, moody, temperamental, and very impatient. But my husband just kept on giving me the tiny blue-green pills that would cure my ails. But my symptoms worsened. My nose started to bleed profusely. My husband left a message with the doctor, but no response. I started developing bruises, and my stomach was always upset. The doctor apparently thought this could be solved by an increase in dose, so I began taking it every 4 hours. I smiled pitifully at my husband, thanking him for his devotion, and swallowing the pill. He ran a gentle hand through my hair. A fistful of hair had come out with it. I cried and cried, but I really just needed to be alone. I sent my husband to the store, and a few minutes after he left, did I realize that I needed to take a dose. I weakly climbed out of bed and made it to the medicine cabinet. There were my little blue pills scattered loosely around. I grabbed the pill bottle and unscrewed the cap so that I could dump them back in. My pills were white. Me and my best friend spent a lot of time together. He comes to my house frequently. We play games and watch videos on the internet. Usually we don't get in trouble, but we do sometimes get bored. The other day I told my friend I wanted to go on the dark web. Everyone was talking about it. I wanted to check if the rumors were true and see if we could find creepy things that everyone talks about. My friend was a little scared, and I must admit I was a bit nervous but also curious and had to see for myself. We get it all set up, ready to start. I scroll through pages with a few links. They had everything here. Hitman for hire, access to credit cards, fake IDs, you name it, it was there. And after a while we started to see some creepier things and came across one that I wish we'd never touched. The name of the link was Slasher Kills. I hit the link and it took us to a chat room with a live video stream, and it showed the front of the house in the suburbs. After a few seconds, a girl appeared in front of it. She looked scared. It was like she knew someone or something was stalking her. A few more seconds passed and she was standing in the front of the house. It was as if she couldn't move, paralyzed with fear. It was at that moment, from nowhere, someone appeared behind her and stabbed her with a machete, raising her into the air. She screamed, but it was of no use. The killer threw her like a piece of garbage to the ground and vanished. My friends and I were in complete shock. We were questioning if this was real. Had we just witnessed a murder on live stream? The chat room was being flooded with messages from other users, but they were celebrating, enjoying watching some poor girl be murdered. And these people were liking it. This was sick and disgusting. My friend told me we should call the police. But what were we going to tell them? Maybe if we gave them the link they could track them, or even track the killer. As we debated what to do, my friend received a text message and opened it up from an unknown number. I asked my friend who texted him. He looked pale. He shows me the text. It read, "You and your friend are next. Slasher kills." Now both of us are in a state of panic. How the hell? How'd they know we were watching? How did they know we were going to call the cops and now come after us? I told my friend we should hide in the bedroom and call them anyway. We had a message we could show them. We had proof someone was coming after us, but my friend checked the phone and the message was now gone. He received a new one saying, "Don't call the cops, but there's a chance for survival. Go to the front door and pick up the bag on the ground." Scared, trying to keep some kind of composure, I ran to the door despite the fear, opened the door and there was a bag. I picked it up, and my friend was still in front of the computer panicking and crying. He didn't even care about the bag. I opened the bag, and I see a mask and a machete, both resembling the ones used by the killer in the video. Not only was I terrified, but I was also confused. Why did they leave this here? Then I received a new text. Put on the mask and pick up the machete. You know what you have to do. It's the only way. What? Are they expecting me to kill my friend? I received another message. This one read, "If you don't do it, someone will kill you both. If you want to live, this is your way out." I can't describe how I feel at this point. I feel like I was just punched in the stomach several times. But also my survival instinct was kicking in. I want to survive, and if this is the only way to do it, I know what I must do. So I put on the mask and grabbed the machete. It's time. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's animation compilation. Yeah, I know it's something I haven't done in a very long time, an animated video. Least of all a compilation, which I've never done at all. The reason for this is because today is my wife and I's 6-year wedding anniversary, so we went out and had some nice food, and also Pandora didn't sleep her whole nap, so I thought I'd give you a treat as well. Let's hope you liked it, eh? I'll see you again on Friday for some scary stories. I think we voted camping, and camping will be coming soon. But don't worry, the other topics will come again, probably the following week. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for checking this out. Stay safe, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.